Time to start now with our next panel. The discussion we will be having is on the leveraging capital for energy projects through innovative financial instruments, and it's a great pleasure for me to be moderating this panel with an excellent set of speakers. I will start with Mr. Kondopoulos on my left, who's the CEO of the Athens Stock Exchange, which is a member as well of the Energy Exchange, but we will not be talking only about the participation in the Energy Exchange, but how do we foresee the developments, let's say, in terms of supporting the industry? If you can give us also some notes on what is the movement, if you wish, in the market in terms of new listings and how the market sees the economy moving ahead in the midst of this energy crisis that we have been talking all this day in the forum.
Thank you, Kostas. Is the mic on?
It is on.
All right, good. So, well, we are the licensed market operator in Greek capital markets. So we are in the middle of things. Just to give you, I guess, maybe worth going through 6 relevant points. The first one should be about, the lay of the land. Basically, we have financed historically something in the order of about 7.4 billion euros in the energy sector, spanning all levels of financing, thinking about IPOs all the way to bond financing. So it's a very relevant source of financing even in Greece. In terms of the type of companies that are in Greece that are involved in the energy sector, we have the traditional oil distillers that have moved over time into the renewable sector and also the biofuel sector, such as motor oil and LP. We have more traditional, I guess, renewable energy source companies which have listed, merged, and then recently carved out, such as Animos, back in, initially in 2014 and the last years in this year. Energy companies like Bitilineos, Terna Energy, and PPC, and also utilities like Admia. So these are big companies in Greece, and they've done all the aspects of financing that you can imagine. And as I said before, we have financed a big part of their plans, and all of these options are available in the future. If we want to think about, I guess, a second point in terms of size of transactions, which is relevant in a situation like this, we had the capital increase of PPC last year, which was a very significant size, and the stock market was able to absorb this and do it successfully. If we want to think about complexity, at least in terms of rather innovation, let's say, in terms of the market structure, what we don't see in many markets, and it has been developed in Greece, and it has actually affected the energy sector, is the bond market, the local corporate bond market, which created an alternative source of financing for energy companies, and they took advantage of it. We have, just to give you an example, we're talking about the local retail network, which absorbed this bond, and also the local institutional investors. But for example, Terna Energy issued a bond of 650 million euros. So these are big sizes, and I think that has offered diversification of financing. I would say on the part of the investors, the local investment community, in a very conservative fashion, it also has offered a high quality hedge for inflation, exactly because it anticipated parts of the capital structure that benefited from what we've seen so far. So it works in both ways. In terms of tools that have been used in the accommodation of those financing plans, we have an innovative centralized book building tool for bond financing, and I think that's going to be heavily used in the future. It also created, we created an anticipation of this, a subset of this bond issuance, the Green Net Athex bond site, which basically promotes sustainable bonds in the energy space that effectively look at the sustainability criteria, and we promote the issuers' efforts in this process, which also has implication about their ability to finance themselves at a different price level than other alternatives. If we want to talk about the complexity of transactions, which is, I think, it's a good indication of how we should be looking in the future, we have the ability, and we've successfully accommodated corporate structures that necessitate the introduction of strategic investors. And we have examples of those sitting in this panel, and I think it's relevant to have in the back of our minds. The most recent example is the carve out of Admie from PPC and the introduction of the strategic investor from China Grid. And I think there are ways of thinking about it in the future for other potential privatizations or recapitalizations of energy companies or, I guess, infrastructure companies that are involved in the energy sector in the future. And those, these are not straightforward transactions, and we managed to do this in a very smooth fashion. Indirectly, but still very relevant, I think the point of, as you mentioned, of being involved in the servicing and the provision of, I guess, infrastructure for energy companies is very relevant. We had in the previous panel, obviously, we talked about physical infrastructure for VESPA, but there's also the virtual infrastructure, which part of it is provided from the technology of Athex. So you can think about it in the allocation of gas capacity, auctioning mechanisms. This is basically our provision of those services, as well as the docking slots at Revithusa. Those are auctioned by technology that Athex is providing. And these are important because they can be replicated in different situations and be accommodated in special circumstances that, as you've mentioned several times today, this whole history, this whole experience has been full of special circumstances. So having the agility to adjust is important, and this is part of, I think, what helps the energy sector. More importantly, we are a major shareholder of Enix, which is the Greek energy exchange, and we are also not only providing services to them for the electricity market, intraday derivatives, and so on and so forth, but also the gas market. And we offer similar services on the electricity side for the region already with Alpex, which is the Albanian and Kosovo market. So we are effectively both directly and indirectly involved in several aspects of the promotion of financing and expansion of the energy sector. And I guess we are here to declare that we're present, ready, and we can deal with any sort of complexity that is necessitated.
Indeed, we have been talking also about regional cooperation and the notion of Greece having in the north a gas hub, an energy hub for the region, and Athex with the services and with the moves of Henex and with the clearing services and the exchange services that we're offering in the region itself. I think we are moving one step ahead, let's say, in this direction to be able to actually claim that we have a real hub, both virtual and physical hub in the region. I'll move now to Andrew Herkovich, Chief Development Officer of the U.S. Department International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, from Washington, D.C. And I would like to ask, how do you see, with this energy crisis and looking at it from the other part of the world, from the other part of the Atlantic, do you see that a lot of projects that we have been mentioning here all day in terms of infrastructure projects, energy terminals, are projects that they will be interesting for financing? And what kind of tools do you believe that we could enhance and mobilize to see these projects actually coming into fruition at the end of the day? Because we had also the CEO of DESFA, Ms. Kali, did mention that we have a lot of projects, a lot of interest in many of these projects, but the financing solutions or the support sometimes that may be necessary or not from other institutions, other, let's say, EU, at the EU level, institutions might be necessary, might be missing, and we may not be seeing, let's say, financial closure of these projects so simple. So what is your view on
Great. So thanks everyone, and thanks everyone who's stayed for this hour. Is there interest in financing? We wouldn't be here if there wasn't interest in financing. So you saw a really robust presence from the U.S. government here today. We had several high-level people from Washington, D.C. here, several of our ambassadors from the region. This is one of the top priorities for the Biden administration right now, is to try to address the energy crisis in Europe using all the tools that are available to us, to the U.S. government. So now the question is can we act quickly and can we act smartly? And even if the transactions aren't right for us to finance, I think there's no question that there's interest in financing these types of transactions. Let me give a little bit of background on DFC. So the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, formerly known as OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, is a new institution that was created about 3 years ago. And we're the U.S. government's development finance institution, but there were a few changes that were made. Some of them quite significant. One, we have a cap of about $60 billion for financing, and we're only using just over half of that right now. We did about $6.7 billion last year, about 140 projects. And we can do debt anywhere from $1 million to $1 billion. We can take equity positions, but one of the most significant changes also is the fact that we don't have any U.S. nexus requirement anymore. So we can provide financing to Greek companies, French companies, companies from almost anywhere in the world where there's not even a U.S. nexus. Obviously, we have a preference that there be a U.S. company involved in some way, but it's not a requirement. And that really has opened up the world to what we do. The other significant change is that our mandate has changed. OPIC was really designed as an agency that was seeking to help mitigate the risks for U.S. investors making overseas investments. And DFC's mandate's a different one. It's to advance development and foreign policy. And the crisis, the energy crisis that we're seeing right now, is at the nexus of development and foreign policy. Now, another change is that DFC's mandate is to focus its efforts in low-income and lower middle-income countries and do some transactions in upper middle-income countries. So you would think that that would take most of Europe out of the equation for DFC, but Congress gave us a special exemption for financing energy transactions in Europe, in Eurasia, in high-income countries. So everything energy related almost everything is fair game for us. And that's why we're here, because we want to see what we can do and what we can be involved in, whether it's helping finance FSRUs or potentially financing other types of transactions that are related to the energy and power sectors as well. I got here yesterday. This has been probably honestly one of the best days that I've had since I've been at DFC to actually talk to people and talk about transactions, because a lot of us have been cooped up for so long, but to see how creative people are being. I enjoyed watching the ambassadors panel from the US government. I will say one thing. They were all talking about gas. Look, that's the practical reality, is that we're figuring out gas, but we do need to take the long-term view on what we're doing, and we have to be careful. My background is I actually ran for the US government a program called Power Africa that started under the Obama administration with the goal of doubling access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. And we were very successful in helping drive new power generation. But we spent so much time focusing on power generation that we didn't make sure that there was adequate transmission and distribution infrastructure for all that new power generation. So while we're all acting quickly, we also need to act smartly, because at the one hand, we all want to unleash gas as quickly as possible, and we should do that. But we also have to think through, I heard one of our ambassadors talking about nuclear, but you asked the question, how many years is it going to be till modular nuclear is commercially viable? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Because all of these things, and you hear everyone talking about green hydrogen as well. There's a lot of hype about green hydrogen. And I talk to very smart, close friends who say, no, this is real, but are we going to see this become commercially viable? But if you're getting ready to build an FSRU and build new pipelines, are you doing that in a smart way so that if green hydrogen does become a reality, you're earning the returns that you need to return? So that you need to earn to make this commercially viable. We got to make sure that everyone, and I think it's human nature. We see every country looking out for its own self-interest. But part of what we're trying to do is encourage both energy independence and energy interdependence. And so we have to do both of those things. And just a couple of points on that, and tell me if I'm going too long. So when you talk about energy security, I said there's independence, and interdependence is driven by power generation. Independence driven by your own power generation, your own energy efficiency. So it's critical that we continue to do things and looking at how to reduce consumption, as our ambassador to Greece said today, things as basic as raising the temperature, but even things like incorporating heat pumps, using solar water heaters, looking at how you're going to reduce the demand as well. And then the other thing is just making sure that you do have your own power generation assets. I think one of the things that we've learned is we talked about why isn't there greater interdependence amongst the countries in the region? Well, there was a lot of interdependence on Russia, and look what happened. So I think everyone has to be cautious when you're doing that as well, that you have to build into the cost of your power system and your energy system some level of redundancy so that things do go wrong. And so as we look at interdependence, that's going to be driven by pipelines and transmission lines. And part of DFC's strategy is to promote cross-border transactions. So we get very excited when we hear about potential transmission infrastructure coming from Egypt to Greece. We get excited when we hear about the pipelines as well. So the reason that we're here is we want to be part of both the energy independence story, but also the interdependence story with the countries that are in this region. A lot of the countries in the Western Balkans, in fact, are upper middle income countries, which means we can do more than just energy there. But we're here to see how we can be supportive, and this is why you see such a robust presence from the U.S. government. So thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for being here with us and listening, passing the good news to us that, U.S. funds from the DFC are actually available here and probably competing with EIB projects maybe on funding. I will give the floor now to Mr. Ioannis Kaltsas. He is the head of investment team for Greece and Cyprus, and we have seen EIB's support heavily, a lot of infrastructure projects in the area on energy. I would like your comments on the recent announcement of the 10 billion euro for supporting the just transition mechanism on a few countries, and Greece is one of them. On top of that, you have been working as well on the mechanism for the clean transition of the Greek islands through this mechanism of the CO2 emission allowances that have been allocated to the country, which may lead to about 2 billion euro of subsidies to the Greek islands for decarbonization efforts, let's say. So, we have seen a lot of support from EIB. There are a lot of projects that they would be keen of financial support from the bank. I would like to hear from you also, what are your plans and, the news around the announcement and how you're supporting the just transition mechanism.
Thank you very much. First, allow me to correct a little bit the truth. We're not a competitor with OPIC. When I was several years ago an investment officer in Africa and Latin America, we used to co-finance a lot of projects. And I'm particularly happy, I have to say, that OPIC does not only support American companies anymore, that this limitation is over, because the European Investment Bank always has been open in terms of procurement and in terms of all the companies that it's supporting. I think, however, to correct the truth, probably OPIC is more popular these days because you finance gas. We stopped financing gas 3 years ago. I mean, we have some face-off projects with Maria Rita and DESFA, and we stopped financing lignite some 18 years ago. So having said that, some of the ideas about hydrogen-ready pipelines, this is where we give our strength, our support. And I know that there are difficult times, particularly for Europe, and I know that there is a big need for gas. We're not against financing gas from others. But being a long-term investment bank, we feel that hopefully soon the war will be over. The energy crisis certainly at some point will be over. The climate change crisis, however, will not end soon. So we feel that it is an obligation to stick to this mission as the European Union Climate Bank and to support those projects that they will provide a better future for our children. And as part of these projects, as part of this European strategy, you are aware that the European Union announced 1 trillion euros Green Deal. And within this Green Deal, a small portion is this small assistance package towards the delignitization region of Europe through the Just Transition Mechanism. So there was the signature yesterday, and I think more important than the 10 billions of euro on cheap loans from the EIB, you should also focus on 1.5 billion euros of grants that they will be combined with EIB loans. And I think this is quite important. Last year here in Greece, as EIB Group, we financed about 4.85 billion euros in Greece. However, we feel it is much more important what we do working together with the Greek government and Greek companies to help them absorb EU funds. Because within this 1.5 billion euros of grants, this is a central pot of money in Brussels. This is a first come, first served pot of money. So the companies, the regions, the promoters that they will reach first for this money, they will get. There will not be a geographical allocation. For structural funds, it's clear. Greece will use 20 billion euros. For RRF, it is clear. Greece will use 32 billion euros. For this money, you have to come with competent proposals. And I'm quite happy that working with the region of Western Macedonia, I think next month we will sign the first project in the Western Macedonia region, which will benefit not only from the EIB cheap financing, but also from the EU grants. And another example of successful blending between EU grants and EIB financing, I think it is this mechanism through Carbon Alliance for the Greek islands, which this government successfully negotiated with Brussels and which the EIB will manage. What is this thing? Well, you mentioned 2 billion euros, but what happens there is there's a number of carbon allowances that when they're monetized, they produce a sum of money, and this money will be used towards grants for projects in the Greek islands. Based on my calculations this morning, because the carbon prices are higher these days, this amount of money is now about 2.5 billion euros. And this money needs to be used over the next 6-7 years. So it is quite important that we work very actively so that the Greek islands diversify their economies beyond the successful tourism. And I know that Americans this year were full in all of the Greek islands, but we need to think beyond tourism. We need to think of productive resources. We need to think of productive projects so that the economy of Greece produce more than tourism. Tourism is excellent. Maybe higher quality tourism will be better, but still we need to do more than tourism. So within Quest and in cooperation with OPIC, with all available partners, we're more than happy to help promoters to come with projects and then also to finance them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kalsias. I will move to Mr. Neil Robert Brown, the Managing Director of KKR. We have heard a lot all this morning about the turbulent times that we're living through, and the energy markets are experiencing a lot of uncertainties, volatilities, surprises, problems, maybe even in the supply chain. And even now we have heard some preferences also in terms of the various forms of energy that we are keen to finance. how is KKR addressing all these issues and navigating through this energy crisis? And what is the the main risks that you are identifying moving forward?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and thank you to the American Hellenic Chamber for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here and with the distinguished panelists. As a starting point, well, first maybe just a word on KKR. I know it's not a household name. It's a U.S.-based global investment firm. We manage close to $500 billion in assets under management. About half of that are in equity products, including infrastructure, energy, climate, technology, and then about half in private credit. My own role is with our Global Institute and our infrastructure business, which basically means I spend a lot of my time focusing on regions of the world that really aren't on the radar of mainstream investors like KKR, but also our peers. And so in that capacity, have spent a significant amount of time on Greece over the last couple of years, and are quite frankly very constructive on the opportunities here, even despite the headwinds of today, if you look at the long term. I think, to your question, and I guess I should say actually, across Europe, we're very heavily invested in energy sustainability and security, from owning distribution grids in Finland to the largest waste energy company in the UK, solar and wind across mostly Southern Europe, but including Austria, Slovakia, etc. And in this region, would focus on just mention a couple things. One is we do have in our portfolio one of the largest LNG producers in the United States. And then also we're in the process of finalizing a very significant investment in Bulgaria in power generation and baseload, which would be a good platform for the region. So there's a lot going on, but it's a good time to be in the geopolitical risk business, which means that it's not so good time in the world. I think there's some good news and bad news. I think the good news is there's record dry powder available. There's capital sitting on the sidelines ready to invest in the kinds of projects that we've talked about today. And I take the point that we've talked a lot about the gas projects as the near term, but certainly in renewables. In fact, the hunger for renewables and other clean energy investments remains incredibly strong around the world. The challenges are very significant in terms of getting that capital off the sidelines. And I'd point to three areas, not exclusive, but certainly three big ones that are affecting investments across Europe and in this region. I mean, one is geopolitics, and obviously it's obvious given the situation with Russia, but people need to also think a little bit bigger. We're focused on Russia because of the issues we're facing here in energy, but the markets are really focused on China and the deterioration in the relationship. And that feeds through to the cost of capital around the world, including in this region. And that's not going away. It's a new normal of political volatility that will affect investment, where we raise capital, where we invest capital, and the risk of premiums attached to it. But there's also populism and nationalism. It's very encouraging to see a lot more unity across Europe and within states, but you're also seeing very big protests, right? There's only so far the populations will go before they break in terms of their willingness to bear the costs of the war. And there's other forms of populism, of course, in the US and all around the world, that is making it increasingly challenged to deal with the third big problem in geopolitics, which are transnational threats. Climate change being one of them, pandemics, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear proliferation, concerns that demand global solutions, but at a time that because of nationalism, global solutions are harder to find. And so these three issues compound for investors, right? Because as a global investor, you have to navigate all of this. They compound and they interact, and it makes a much more treacherous investment environment. I think the second issue, of course, is inflation and supply chain disruptions. There's been a lot of talk today about projects earning outsized returns, and I agree that a number of projects are, but also look at the costs. Costs are going up significantly for materials, if you can find them, workers, if you can find them, and the cost of capital, which is also compressing margins. So you can't just think about what are the projects today making, what are future projects going to make, what are the expectations for returns that are going to be required to get that new investment that everybody's so keen to get. And the third is regulatory uncertainty. I think you would have to, have your head in the ground to think that the regulatory framework that most of Europe is operating under today is working. Clearly, there are massive failures. There's many reasons for those failures, but the biggest failure, of course, being that the marginal pricing by gas clearly is not working. However, a number of the solutions being talked about sound a lot like shooting yourself in the foot. Something like windfall taxes. I understand the sentiment. But why are you penalizing investors in renewables, for example, that you want to do more investment? It just doesn't make sense. And so I think what we need, and one of the earlier speakers on the panel talked about getting at the root causes. We need to deal with those root causes, not just the Band-Aid approach. Also, our own government in the US also has some issues with this, right? Very inconsistent policy on gas, right? There's very limited support for natural gas investment. The DOE is still sitting on decisions that would allow more export of US LNG, right? I used to work in government. I don't expect perfection, far from it, but we do need a bit more realism in the kinds of investments we need to deal with this crisis today. And if an investor is willing to put money into a gas project, they're taking the risk at the tail end, right? So I think the accumulation of that is you're in a situation now where you have higher risk premiums, so higher cost of capital. You have more competition for the capital that's willing to come off the sidelines. And I do worry about that somewhat. I worry about that in this region because other parts of Europe, Western Europe, particularly Germany, is charging ahead to go out to get contracts, to get investment. And this region is still a little bit behind. I would say that Greece is an exception to that. I think Greece is really outstanding, but the rest of the region is still struggling. And then there's also a flight to safety, right, which compounds the other two. So there are real challenges. I think I sound more negative than I expect to be. For us, how do we approach it? I mean, the first is, we recognized 10 years ago that you needed geopolitical expertise in-house. You needed macro expertise in-house. You needed ESG decarbonization expertise in-house, because these are the things that can shift an investment. So these are the expertise that you need to be able to make investments, like investing in a lignite plant in Bulgaria in the middle of the biggest energy crisis in European history. You got to have some expertise to understand the situation, to be able to build an investment thesis, to make that work and to clean it up, right? So that's our approach in terms of being a good partner to be able to make investments. Second is disaggregating risks, really trying to break it down. Commercial risk, technology risk, regulatory risk, political risk, and see what we can do to mitigate various pieces of it. You can't mitigate the whole thing, but you can take pieces. And that leads to the third piece, which is you always have to have good partners. You have to have good local partners, corporate partners, SOEs, but then also other government partners, organizations like the EIB, like DFC, that can help you mitigate certain pockets of that risk to then bring down the cost of capital.
Thank you very much, Neil. Because we don't have a lot of time, we're running out of time actually. What I would like to keep is, if we consider these main two changes and risks moving ahead, the inflation going up, maybe cost of capital going up, do we foresee any risks for the energy transition targets of the EU? I mean, we do understand not everything that has been said before. Maybe I would just on the comment from the rest of the panel members, because the supply chain risks as well, they are jeopardizing renewable energy investments as well, because there is a lot of hype around renewable investments everywhere in the world, in Greece included. But projects need to be bankable and financially viable. And the environment seems, on one hand, because of the war in Ukraine and because of what has been said about natural gas, the diversification causes, etc. We need to move to renewables, but on the other hand, we see that there are some difficulties that they actually lie ahead. And I would like to comment how this can be addressed. Maybe each one of you, from your perspective, with various tools, smart ways, or smart instruments that they may be in place, or anything else that you have in mind. If you can have that in a kind of a short, if you wish, statement, so that we can close the discussion. And I will start with Mr. Kodopoulos.
Okay. Thank you, Kostas. So I think, look, it's, I mean, the reason that we're talking about risks right now is because we are living through them. It's not that those risks did not exist 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So the point here is you can't know. It's absolutely under threat, the path to renewables. And I can tell you it's under threat because guess what? I mean, we cannot typically predict, or the regulators or the investors, 3 or 4, 1 year ahead. They certainly cannot predict. We pretend that we predict, but we cannot really predict 50 years ahead, or at least the range of error is substantial. So what do? What you do is that you need to, and I think Neil touched on this, you need to diversify your sources of, the path that will take you there. So a private equity firm, will eventually come to the stock market and, use that potentially as an exit once, certain things have been advanced well enough, they met their targets, and now they pass the torch. But what I would argue, and that's obviously tainted by my new role, is that you need to be thinking about equity and cost of capital. If you're thinking about, oh my God, interest rates are going up, well, equity is another way of looking at it, not just private equity, but public equity. And it's good guidance to be thinking about public markets, especially in situations where you have high risk, because guess what? The public market will give you signals, and you want those signals as quickly as possible. Recognize that they're unavoidable, and just use all possible sources of financing that you can if this is where you want to go. Let me stop here.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
If you can, because we don't have
30
time.
seconds. So you stole my point. I talked about energy independence. Part of energy security is having the diversified energy mix. And this is it's absolutely critically important that you have a diversified energy mix. And that's what DFC is supporting, all the different technologies, because an energy portfolio is like a stock portfolio. You can't predict what's going to happen. You can't predict that suddenly solar panel prices are going to skyrocket. You're going to have inflation, and all of your points were excellent. This is what we're seeing happening, and the expectations that happen, or that suddenly there's going to be a shortage of gas. But if suddenly everything gets worked out in Ukraine, and suddenly everything goes back to normal again, and then everyone's made all these investments. So you have to build both the diversified energy mix, but also flexibility into what you're doing. So the question is, if you're going to build a new pipeline, are you going to build a pipeline that can accommodate green hydrogen? So you don't have to rebuild that later on. Then you're going to have to really get some expertise to see, is the green hydrogen play real, or is it just a lot of hype? So it's all about making sure that you build in diversity and flexibility.
Just very quickly, my belief is that the very high current energy prices will produce much quickly transition actually to new energy resources and technology breakthroughs. We see startups that they do crazy proposals, or some will say crazy proposals, but there's a lot of investment in innovation and a lot of investment from big players to renewable energy. So I do believe that this current crisis actually will accelerate the energy transition.
Thank you. And Neil, very, very good.
I completely agree with that. I mean, energy transition is a juggernaut that is moving, and it's going to be one of the largest transformations of the global economy ever. And it's a mega theme for investors. Whether there are specific targets hit or not, I don't know. Nobody can predict that. the question for me is, so I'm convinced that Greece will have an important role to play. It will be a leader in that transition. It's doing the right things. I worry a bit about the region. And so to me, the question for this region is, will there truly be a regional approach so that the entirety of the region can benefit, and also be a leader? There needs to be more integration. There needs to be better public-private partnerships, a whole range of steps. I think the potential is there, but it takes a lot of work. We can't be complacent.
Thank you very much. And we can now move to the next panel with Mr. Spirtounias moderating the panel. So please, the floor is yours. Join me in applauding our speakers because we have had a very excellent discussion.
Well, hello. I'm Elias Spirtounias. I'm the Executive Director of the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, and I have the privilege to moderate a very interesting panel regarding the energy architecture of Southeast Europe, and the existing strategic priorities under, of course, the latest development. With us are Ms. Laura Lockman, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Diplomacy in the Bureau of Energy Resources of the U.S. Department, Ms. Alexandra Zoukou, Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources, Ministry of Environment and Energy, Dr. Dimitris Psycholios, First Vice President, Regulatory Authority for Energy, and virtually connected, Mr. Yannis Maniatis, former Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change, and alternate professor at the University of Piraeus. I welcome you all. We don't have much time. We are behind the schedule, the time. Anyway, just a short introduction. It is more than obvious that a new energy architecture is urgently needed in Europe, and especially in Southeast region. That would transform Southeast Europe to not only an energy transit hub, but also to a major energy production unit, utilizing all available resources, and at the same time maintaining the goal of green transition as possible, even with a slower pace under the current circumstances. So each of you has 4 minutes for initial remarks, and then I will proceed with some, let's say, questions. So I will start with Ms. Lockman. Ms. Lockman, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for including me in the panel this evening. Very happy to see my friend Alexandra again, and very nice to meet you as well. So we, in looking at the topic for the day, the Reinventing Energy Architecture in Southeast Europe, this holds the potential, if done correctly, to increase energy security for this region and for the greater European region, and I would argue for global energy security as well. And I think it's important to focus in on what we mean, how we interpret reinventing. And from our perspective, that would be reinventing in terms of making certain that we are actually in this region, as in all others, looking at diversity of sources, energy types, and routes. And we have long held those as our guidelines, but it has been difficult, I think, in practice to achieve. So, the best scenario is if you have sources produced locally and you don't have the issue of relying on imports or relying on unreliable suppliers. The next best choice is if you have a scenario where you're relying on suppliers who are trustworthy and reliable. And obviously, in the current scenario, it's become very clear that there is an urgent need to disentangle ourselves from reliance on sources from Russia, because they have obviously proven themselves to be an extremely unreliable supplier and one prosecuting an unjust war against a European nation. And in that regard, the US government has been and will continue to work with our European partners in this region and the broader European continent to try to meet the immediate energy security needs of Europe, and to continue to move down the road as quickly as possible to reducing the demand for fossil fuels in the first place through energy efficiency, through introduction of new technologies, and then to continue developing wind, solar, hydropower in certain cases. And yes, LNG infrastructure as well will be important in the immediate term also, but we have to keep our eye on all of these different balls at the same time. In that regard, you may be aware that the US and the EU established in March of this year a task force. This was signed by President Biden and the Commission President von der Leyen. And this was aimed at the US helping facilitate 15 BCM of natural gas to Europe in this year. We will surpass that level. In fact, we already have. But again, simultaneously, we're working to help with our US energy technology suppliers on the efficiency and demand reduction sides as well. Europe, for its part, has committed to and is in fact moving in the direction of bolstering its LNG infrastructure around the continent, and also moving towards strengthening regional interconnectors. And this would be for both natural gas, but also electricity. And I think we have to keep a very close eye on the latter as well. Obviously, the natural gas we need in the short term. The electricity interconnectors not only help if you have natural gas to produce the electricity, but then in greater incorporation of renewables is possible. And it's a stimulus for incorporation of renewables, particularly wind and solar. Of course, hydrogen, green hydrogen can be used as well eventually. And we are very pleased to see that there are several regional interconnectors, electrical interconnectors being pursued in the region at this point, including some that would link 3 different continents. So that is impressive. And the US government definitely stands ready to assist in any way we can on those fronts. There are some great examples too in the region, of course, of moving to strengthen LNG architecture. And, you've got the Kirk terminal in Croatia, you have Vlora in Albania. Obviously here in Greece, you have some excellent examples in Revithousa and also in Alexandropoli. So that is exactly the kind of thing that is needed at this point in time. But really, again, the US government position is that true energy security only comes when you have gotten to a certain point in the energy transition, so that, again, we can rely on local and more renewable, cleaner sources of energy, including nuclear, I should say. I did not mention that earlier. But that we see is definitely part of the mix, and one I know that is in the plans here in the region as well. So perhaps I will stop there and allow time for my fellow panelists and questions as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lockman. I think we move to Ms. Zduku now, and your 4 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Um,
First of all, let me thank you very much for the invitation. Hello, I know it's quite late, but you're still here. If I can transmit a little bit of energy in the room to stay here. I was also intrigued, Laura, by the title of our panel, Reinventing Energy Architecture. And I think that this is certainly what does currently everybody in Europe, what is doing under the pressure, of course, from Russia, keep on using natural gas as a weapon. But let me remind you that Greece has always been working, in this strategy, which is the differentiation of sources and routes. And I think that this principle has driven all our decisions, Laura, in the last 20 years. That's why from the very beginning, if I remember, from the very beginning of the introduction of natural gas in Greece, since 2000, we built the LNG terminal in Revithoussa, together with a gas pipeline. Then we upgraded it in 2018, increasing the storage and also the regasification capacities. And this has allowed us to receive gas from a variety of sources, including the USA, which has been the main source now of LNG to Greece since 2020. Also, we hosted, as we all know, TAP, since the beginning of 2021. What I can say is that the war has confirmed, from the one hand, the correctness of our strategy, but also the war urges us to go further with this strategy. What I mean with this is that we really need at this point to accelerate all energy projects, starting first with the development of additional LNG terminals, projects that are already under schedule. I'm referring to the Alexandroupolis, as Laura mentioned, FSRU, which is under construction, as you know, in this schedule to be ready, hopefully by next year, end of 2023. But also another similar project, Dioriga, FSRU, offshore Attiki. This is also under study, and it is expected to come on stream maybe within 2025. So with the above projects, Greece will become fully independent as concerns gas supply routes. With our existing connection, of course, with Bulgaria, as well as with a new that is expected to come into operation next month. I'm referring to the IGB. Greece and Bulgaria natural gas networks will be fully interconnected. And of course, the LNG in Alexandroupolis will also help Bulgaria to become fully independent from the Russian route. Perhaps more LNG terminals may be necessary. Of course, I'm not the proper person, but I think that depends on the demand of LNG in the greater region. And of course, it depends on the availability of the necessary interconnections. What else we do? We promote, as you know, the construction of the interconnecting gas pipeline between Greece and North Macedonia. This project is going to provide North Macedonia access also to the diversification of supplies of Greece. And as far as I know, at the second stage, it's going to help also other countries like Kosovo and Serbia. Except for natural gas, which we understand will have a significant role to play in the energy transition, and for which, of course, our main strategy is to establish the conditions for a smooth supply without any dependence. We continue our strategy in Greece for decarbonization. You mentioned, Laura,
solar, wind projects, hydrogen. We are fully endorsing new technologies, and we had the chance also in the 3+1 to have a serious discussion and further enhance the cooperation between Greece and US. Here, of course, the good thing is that we have the necessary money, the necessary financial tools in order to help Greece moving towards this green transition. I'm referring to the structural funding, but also the RRF. We continue the delignitization. Whatever is, no matter what is happening now, and I'm referring, of course, to the political decision to open again, turn on again the lignite plans, to continue them. I want to stress that the main target is, of course, to close down lignites by the end of this decade. Let me also say that we take special care for the regions that are affected by the energy transition, the areas that previously, as you know, had a very heavy dependence in Western Macedonia. And it's a big achievement that Greece was the first country in Europe that managed to take the green light from a European Commission. And it's not just a green light, but it's a quite generous package of money, up to 5 billion. So now it's up to Greece to perform the next day in the region. Our strategy also includes electricity interconnections with our neighbors, another interconnection with Bulgaria. And I'm finishing with this. I think that an important dimension also of our strategy is the electricity interconnections with Middle East and Africa and North Africa. We keep on saying that this area has a lot of renewables potential, and this is why we foster in Greece the Eurasia interconnector, but also, as you know, the electricity interconnection between Egypt and Greece. We firmly believe that Greece in the next years with these projects will be able to be a corridor bringing cheap green energy to Southeastern Europe. And last, we should not underestimate the decision of the Prime Minister, given the circumstances, to decide to speed up also the process in Greece for further exploration I'm referring to the hydrocarbons. Of course, we are not in the same timely position as Cyprus or Israel. I wish we were at their stage, but even this decision to accelerate for the next 2 years all the seismic surveys that are necessary, I think, is on a positive dimension.
Thank you, Luciano. Mr. Psycholios? Yes. Thank you. You allow me a comment regarding the previous panel about the regulator. Now I'm wearing the hat of the European, as a member of the European regulators. I heard something about not only the previous panel, but a lot of panels today, about the marginal price. I agree that the marginal price, that mechanism has a lot of problems, and we can gather all together and throw rocks to that mechanism. However, I haven't heard anything regarding the price of the natural gas itself. Is it the problem of the marginal of that mechanism, or is the problem that the natural gas price is not fair? Investment companies have not answered, at least until now. Why don't we, let's say, explore the possibilities of reducing the price of the wholesale price of the natural gas, or why the TTF price is many times higher than the Henry Hub price? I think in a mechanism, it depends what you put. It depends on the input. If you put cheese in a mechanism that produces pies, you have cheese pies. If you put meat, you have meat pies. So if you put high price of natural gas, then you have high marginal prices. I'm not sure if we have answered the question. Is it the problem of the marginal price mechanism or high prices of gas? This is the first comment. The second is that usually the regulator
does not select the best solution. Usually, we select the least worst solution. In this case, we don't have an alternative. All the other alternatives that have been proposed, according to the literature at least, since 70s, they all collapse to the marginal price. The average price, I have heard a lot of things. Now I'm wearing the hat of the professor. I have heard a lot of things. The average price, the minimum price, all of them at the end, according to the literature at least, they converge to the marginal price. This is the full stop. That was the common answer to the previous comments. In any case, I prepare for something else, but since we are talking about natural gas, I will start with that. Now, regarding the strategy of our region and for Greece especially, I think the answer, the headline of that strategy is a quote that JFK said some decades ago: be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. This is, according to my opinion, this is the strategy that Greece and the whole region has to follow. Obviously, we all agree that the danger is the definite Russian gas cut, sorry. And at last, I think the European political elite realized that we will live without any, not only gas, but other resources as well, that comes from Russia. So where is the opportunity there? This is the danger, of course. Where is the opportunity? So the opportunities for Greece, according to my opinion, these are my opinions, and they are not expressed. I don't know if they express the opinion of the board of my regulator. But according to my opinion, the opportunity lies, for Greece at least, it can play the role that it used to play for the last 3,000 years of the gatekeeper for Europe. What do I mean gatekeeper? We can be the main gate for natural gas supply, at least for the region. According to our calculation, at least the central, mainly for the Central Europe as well. When I'm saying Central Europe, I mean Austria, Hungary, etc. So this is the role, I think, this is the opportunity for Greece. How can we do this? I think the first step toward this direction is we have to create a gas hub with physical delivery here in Greece, especially in northern Greece. Since Alexandra, I think, or Laura said something about Alexandroupoli, according to my opinion, the area that checks all the boxes is Alexandroupoli. In that area, we have most of the pipelines are crossing, Greek pipelines or international pipelines. We will probably have a storage capacity. We have an American base there. We have a lot of FSRUs. So all the boxes are checked. If we create there a hub, a gas hub, we can control, that we say in finance, the distribution channels. We cannot control the production because we don't produce in this area, at least now. We don't produce any natural gas. However, we can control, let's say we can manage whatever, the distribution channels. So this is not a theoretical project. This is a project that we're working along with the Hellenic Energy Exchange and the Central European Hub from Austria for more than 2 years to create a hub in northern Greece, probably in Alexandroupoli. Why? Because this will increase energy efficiency and energy security in the whole region. When I'm talking whole region, we mean Balkans, Hungary, Ukraine, Moldavia, Austria, etc. The innovation of that hub is that we will not use fundamental prices. What do I mean fundamental prices? We will use differentials. The gas will be priced upon and not upon different. We will price differential that will be based on a major index, either in TTF or in Henry Hub. Why? Because we have to. This is what our
our data are showing that one of the problems we have with the natural gas pricing in Europe is that most of the prices are driven through pipeline gas and not from LNG. So if we can create, since the main supplier of Europe is USA, we can create a gas hub whose price is based on Henry Hub. So let's stop here. I didn't say anything about electricity, but in any case.
Well, you will have a chance later, as long as we have the time. I'm going to Professor Magnatis. Hello, Mr. Magnatis. Your 4 minutes, if it's possible, views on the energy architecture of Southeast Europe, please.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel. I will start with few words about the current European natural gas crisis. After the Russian invasion in Ukraine, energy security has returned to the first stage of interest, joining climate change or climate crisis as a top concern for governments. Diversification of alternative import sources and routes remains key to decrease the region's import dependency on Russia. My first comment is that besides the current natural gas crisis, we have even until now a constant negative approach of EU institutions against funding gas networks and pipelines infrastructure. We should add to the above that during the last 6 years, the European indigenous gas production has decreased by 35%, from 145 BCM in 2015 to only 95 BCM in 2021, a decrease of 50 billion cubic meters in just 6 years. Today, Europe produces only 9% of the gas it consumes. Europe has every interest in exploiting its domestic natural gas reserves, which are estimated at 10 to 12 trillion cubic meters in total. They are found in North Sea, Black Sea, Adriatic, Ionian Sea, and East Mediterranean. According to the Greek Hydrocarbon Authority, in the Ionian Sea and south and west of Crete, the identified geological structures could host reserves reaching 2,000 billion cubic meters. Second comment on the green energy transition. Green energy creates new geopolitical challenges. Demand for critical minerals rise by as much as 6 times, while specific minerals demands, such as lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, will increase up to 42 times. But 75% of processing of these materials is dependent on China. So China dominance extends to renewables and battery manufacturing, with 50% on wind turbines, 85% on photovoltaics, 90% on batteries, and more than 50% on electric vehicles. My third comment on the European energy crisis. EU must formulate a new, complete strategic plan of both alternative supplies as well as avoidance of over-dependence from third countries, every third country. In parallel, all these events have highlighted the need for the EU to formulate a new modern, as I call it, energy strategy doctrine. A doctrine for today's world, which is very different from the world in 2000s. In other words, the energy green transition alone is not enough anymore as an energy strategy. Now, coming to Greece, a few words about Greece. Greece, having a wise and multidimensional energy strategy since 2010, has benefited from increased diversification of energy sources. Having TAP, IGB, the Alexandroupolis FSRU, the LNG terminal in Revithoussa, all these projects that we have included in European funding instruments 10 years ago will give to Greece the potential to transfer to EU up to 30 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. Should the East Med gas pipeline be constructed, this would bring the total to 40 BCM, 40 billion cubic meters, close to 10% of the total European consumption. When both its lines will be in operation, it will carry a total of 21 BCM per year. The EastMed construction will be completed within 36 months, with a total investment of 5.2 billion euros and a life cycle of more than 50 years. EastMed will allow the transportation of hydrogen, the fuel of the future, and also will have a synergy with renewable energy sources along its route. About the intercontinental electricity interconnectors, which will bring green energy from Israel and Egypt to Northern Europe through Greece. This is a great geopolitical opportunity for Greece. This could also take a form of, as I call it, a new electric highway, a south-north highway starting from Greece, crossing Bulgaria and Romania towards Germany. So besides the pipeline diplomacy, we need a new electric cable diplomacy that will account for the geopolitical instability of the energy transition. Just to say that Greece already 8 years ago has increased the total installed capacity in renewables by 240%. And since 2014, Greece is the 6th higher country all over the world in per capita production of photovoltaic energy, as well as the 6th higher country in EU in solar, in both solar and wind participation in production of electricity. And finalizing my remarks, we must learn from our mistakes. We cannot allow our future energy system to rely on 100% imported equipment. We must ensure that key technologies are also produced in Europe. Otherwise, we're just paving the path for repeated and possibly even more acute price surges in the future. All the above indicate that Greece and East Mediterranean may grow into a new hopeful source of energy supply for the European Union. Thanks. This is my first approach.
Thank you, Professor Magnats. I think you touched a very critical point here about, increasing our production here in the EU, especially on, let's say, equipment that are needed, for, let's say, for the renewable sources, for photovoltaic parks, and this is something, it's a problem here, and how we can deal with that. So I have a few questions, and please let's respond to that and reply to that in a very short time. First question to Ms. Loughlin, okay? Actually, two questions. Speaking about LNG, you are the major supplier of LNG, but we heard that there are some voices in US that warning about, possible shortage in LNG and whether, you can keep supplying all these large quantities that we need as Europe, okay? So I need a comment on that. And second, is EastMed back on the table? Because last year we had the impression that it was, somehow abandoned or sidelined, as a project. But now, considering all the circumstances, I think it's getting back as a viable project, okay? So please, your comment on that. And of course, anyone who wants to step in, please, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for those questions. On the first, yes, the U.S. has been an increasingly significant supplier of LNG to Europe. This year, about 70% of U.S. LNG shipments leaving the U.S. have had the destination of Europe. And that is significantly more, but 2.5 times more than the previous year. So we are very happy about the ability to assist Europe, particularly at this point in time. I think it'll be obviously crucial for this winter and next winter in particular. In terms of our ability to continue being a significant supplier, our companies have, right now they're living their investment decisions of a couple of years ago. So at this point, we're not expecting significant additional quantities of LNG to come online in 2022 or in 2023, frankly, again, because of the long cycle of those investments. But as of 2024, 2025, we start to see some fairly significant additional volumes come online. So we are very short time away from producing record amounts of LNG. So we do believe that our suppliers will be part of the solution in this interim period going forward and helping our partners in that regard. On the second question regarding the EastMed gas pipeline, we've had some conversations up here this evening about, certainly, again, the role that LNG will be playing in this interim period. And we have had some discussions about the need for transition to cleaner forms of energy. And so from the US government perspective, when you're looking at making investments, it seems to make sense to try to take advantage, first of all, of existing infrastructure where you can, and where you need to build infrastructure to do, the least expensive and least time-bound option. And then also, again, to be building up your renewable energy capacity and use. And where for us those come together, in our view, would be, for example, in these electricity interconnectors that we've talked about. Alexandra mentioned EuroAsia, the ones connecting Israel here and Greece, and also connecting Egypt and Greece, because those kind of fit those bills. And then again, building up the infrastructure on the LNG side, as you've been doing. And when there is more gas available through development in the Eastern Mediterranean, perhaps smaller, shorter interconnectors between those developments and existing infrastructure in Egypt. And then you can receive that gas here in Greece or elsewhere in the region. So from our perspective, these are very good questions to be asking as we keep in mind our broader goals, both US and European goals.
Well, just a comment on this. Europe now is seeking right to get independent, and if it tries to find a solution on this, then Mr. Magnatis mentioned, then it has to produce its own gas, right, in Europe. And for me, it makes absolutely sense that the discussion on exploitation of EastMed reserves is returned and has returned and is on the table. Of course, exploration is still in progress in this region, but what I can say is that if the confirmed total recoveries are large enough to justify these investments, then any option, why not including a pipeline or any other option, I don't know, may become attractive.
Mr. Magnatis, do you have a comment on that?
Well, just let me remind all of us what recently has been published, not as an estimation, but as a study in during an international meeting. The EastMed reserves in Israel and Cyprus, excluding Egypt, excluding Greece, in Israel and Cyprus, are enough in order to send gas to Damietta and Itku, the two LNG infrastructures in Egypt, to feed the regional economies. I'm talking about Israel, Lebanon, and Jordan. And third, to send an amount of about 10 billion cubic meters through EastMed. So on the issue of the question whether there is enough quantity of natural gas, the answer so far is that for whatever we know now, we will feed the regional economies, the two LNG facilities, as well as EastMed. This estimation has been given also to the Italian government, and this is why Prime Minister Mario Draghi, as well as the five biggest political parties in the Italian parliament, have asked to improve, to support, to finance the EastMed pipeline, which can give a hope to the Italian and the rest of European energy infrastructure. So finally, the company of the pipeline is going to submit an application for financing to European Union funds, having all the documentation which is necessary for this funding. Let's see in very few weeks what will happen. But in any case, if we have as a priority our independence from the Russian gas, the two LNG infrastructures is in Egypt, as well as EastMed, are our two pillars in order to improve and to implement such a strategy. Both of them.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Mr. Chivagos, do you have a comment on that, or should I move to the next question?
Very small comment. If we, I think our opinion as a regulator is.
Your microphone, please.
Our opinion as a regulator is more, let's say, probably it's an oversimplification, but assuming that natural gas is used mainly for electricity production, we think that we are seeing that depots in Cyprus and Egypt as depots of energy in general, not of natural gas. So the market will decide the cheapest way to transfer the energy to Europe, either as natural gas, as electricity, as hydrogen, through gas carriers, through pipeline, I don't know. But I think the market will decide, apart from the geopolitics that Professor Mayat said.
Thank you. I have another question here for all of you. Just before the panel with the US ambassadors, as well with the ministers of energy of regional countries, a key point that was stretched out was cooperation, collaboration, and especially speaking about countries that are not only EU members right now, belonging to the region. And I was wondering, and I want the views of US government, but also Ms. Duku and the rest of you, whether Greece can play a role here by dragging, these countries, and with the EU also investment help, to having collaborative projects and help in the independence of their energy dependence from Russia, actually. So I want to comment on that because that was exactly the key that was exactly stretched out in the two panels. How we can collaborate in achieving energy dependence and also energy security and effective supply.
Thank you. Just a few comments on that. Yes, we absolutely have to collaborate. There's no way any of us can do this individually, and each of us has different mixes of resources and needs and strengths, and so we need to bring all of that together. And at this point, I think we are doing a pretty good job of having these conversations, both transatlantic and then within the European context as well, bringing the right players together to have these, conversations about the reality that we face now and what practical solutions we need to put in place in the very immediate term. This crisis has focused everyone's mind in an entirely different way. So I think that's a good thing. And we are starting to have some real progress in moving in some of the directions we need to. You've seen reduced dependence on Russian resources already. You've seen moves towards, greater, regional projects, greater investment in those and renewables and on energy efficiency. And we need to continue full force, all as one in that direction.
Thank you. Ms. Duku, do you think Greece can play a key role here in, let's say, bringing all these countries together and with the EU, of course, investments or US support, to...
I think, Mr. Spiritounias, if you see in the last 3 years what this government has done, there has been a remarkable, I think, progress on building on regional cooperations, and we have tangible, proofs of this. So it's all these projects that are being materialized at this moment are materialized because we have a strong cooperation among partners, not only neighboring partners, but also international partners. You see the Prime Minister visiting several countries, countries from the Gulf region, from everywhere actually, and I think that this is a key point now, especially in this period, building upon such cooperations. I think can make us stronger, and obviously the landscape, the energy landscape will be completely different if we continue on building on this. And also the initiatives like the 3+1 initiative we have established. We have, Laura, remind me, another initiative which is, don't remember, apart from the 3+1 initiative, we have
The East Med Gas Forum as well.
no, of course, the East Med Gas Forum is another one, but also the cooperation among countries in the region as well. I don't remember the name of the institution that we have. Naruk is also one. So I'm mentioning this just to show that
There's a
yes,
context there.
and Greece can obviously play a significant role.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another question. Okay, is nuclear energy back on the table?
I'm sorry.
Nuclear energy.
Nuclear energy.
Yes.
Is it okay?
Is it back on the table? Because there's a quite discussion happening outside there in Europe or in US as well.
Yes,
about the
and
nuclear
first of all,
energy.
if I could just say one thing on the last question, yes, Greece has had a lot of foresight, I think, that is now bearing fruit in terms of Greece having developed so many different parts of the energy sector domestically and having established some of these cooperative mechanisms regionally, that you're in a much better place at this point. And so congratulations for having that foresight and putting the effort into it. And
I
then
was referring to the PTEC. This is what I was trying to
PTEC,
remember earlier.
yes, the European, yes. So, and then on nuclear, yes, the Biden administration does indeed believe that nuclear has to be an important part of the mix. If you're looking to move towards zero emissions and you need to replace the fossil fuels, that I think by definition has to be part of the mix. And so you're looking at conventional nuclear, but also to the development of small modular reactors, which we think can be a good solution in many circumstances as well. And so US companies are involved in this development, and we have some cooperative relationships with some countries in the region, in fact, namely Romania. I think that's the one that's the most advanced at this point, but absolutely hope to prove out that technology and develop it in a way that it can be part of the solution.
Ms. Duku, do you think...
Regarding nuclear,
do you think ever we will consider?
Greece, as you do, has decided since long ago to stay away from nuclear energy due to the risks of this technology, but also in combination with the seismicity in the region. I don't have the necessary knowledge to reply on this, but we note, of course, that the discussion has come back in the European level and also in other countries. But we believe that any such decisions, I think safety should be the first concern. And I'm saying this because, a possible nuclear accident has no borders, so we should be very careful.
Of course, yeah. I mean, just watching some, Ukraine, what's happening right now. But this is an old technology. I mean, I assume that we are talking about, modern reactors. But anyway, Mr. Magnez, you want to add something on that? Yeah, please.
Just a comment on the previous question about the Greek-American cooperation. I remember 10 years ago when we have worked very constructively, the Greek and the American government, in order to convince the then Bulgarian government to accept its participation in the Greek-Bulgarian interconnector, IGB. And now I feel happy to see that IGB, 10 years later on, is a reality. But now, since we all agree that Greece is an anchor of stability in the greater East Mediterranean area, and since we have so excellent cooperation with the United States of America, I think that we should go on, besides all the other issues, in order to establish a common Greek-American research center on renewables and on green transition. I think that the cooperation between the Greek universities and companies with respective American will bring knowledge, innovation, and new investments in our region. I hope, I really hope that this could be.
Thank you very much. I think innovation, knowledge, skills, well, whatever we're discussing here are necessary. Without those, we cannot do anything. No projects, no goals, no anything. So you're perfectly right. Speaking as a professor, but also I think as a minister, but I think we all agree here that we need, technology is moving so fast, and definitely, skills, skillful people, and knowledgeable people needed, for all this project that we are discussing right now. I have so many questions.
I fully agree with Alexandra. I don't have to.
Well, I'm sure we all agree here in most of the.
I always agree with my former boss.
Well, I don't know if anything wants to add. Anything of you wants to add a last word, but I'm pretty sure that everybody here is looking for closing. This conference, which started, at 11 in the morning. I want to thank you all for being with us here today, and at the same time, by the way, Professor Maniatis, thank you for connecting with us. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is the end of the 6th Southeast Europe Energy Forum. I think we had an excellent program, excellent speakers, good news. Okay, we didn't get good news from Brussels, but hopefully, soon we'll get some. But anyway, thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward next year again on Friday. Okay, sorry. So there's always wants to say something.
The announcement of last minute, because in the program, Minister Georgiadis was supposed to talk. Due to the late hour, Minister Georgiadis will be here in 5 minutes. He will go upstairs to the reception. I'm sure that you would like to exchange with him directly upstairs over a glass of wine. And Ambassador Tsounis as well is coming in 10 minutes' time. So he's already upstairs. So we can all go upstairs to have a drink. Thank you very much.